Hi, I'm Ron. Thanks for checking this out. Last time, you remember, we were playing with a tuner app and looking at why the relationships between pitches matter more than the individual pitches. We're going to be carrying over some of those concepts and vocabulary, so I've put a link in the description box to that video if you need to see it or if you need to review it. Today, we're going to start expanding our vocabulary beyond basic scale. So grab your favorite flute in A and let's get started. Native American style flute players talk about basic scale a lot, and if I play it, you'll recognize it right away. A lot of musicians know this as minor pentatonic scale, and it's the first scale that most of us learn to play on our flutes, and to be honest, for many people, it's the only scale they ever learn to play on their flute. It's really kind of a conservative bet that 90% of the music you hear played on Native American flute, even by recording artists, uses just this scale. And it's really not an entirely unreasonable choice. Pentatonic scales are probably the most commonly used scales on the planet, and minor pentatonic scale is a favorite among many different peoples. You hear it in cultural music all over the place, including indigenous music from here in the Americas. Here's the first phrase of an old Cherokee tune that I've adapted to the flute that you can play easily in basic scale. And here's a really stock, simple, bluesy kind of lick that also uses basic scale. So, you can really use it in a lot of different ways, and we hear it all the time, so it's an easy scale for people to hear starting out. And to be honest, it's also a very, very useful scale for kind of faking it. You can noodle around on your flute in minor pentatonic while musicians around you are playing jazz or rock or country or just about anything else, and it'll kind of sound like you're at least fitting in part of the time. But when we play it on a 6-hole Native American style flute, we're actually doing something pretty unnatural. We keep one hole covered all the time. So if we do nothing but play in minor pentatonic mode, in effect, we're turning our 6-hole flute into a 5-hole flute. I've even seen some people put a leather wrap around the hole so they don't even have to think about it. Right? It's just always covered. So what this means, of course, at least what it suggests, is that minor pentatonic scale is not the natural scale of our flute. I'm going to play what I think of as the natural scale on our flute. What that means is I'm just going to start down here with all holes covered, and then I'm just going to walk up finger after finger until all of the holes are uncovered. And I'm going to do this twice. Some of you have asked me to try to angle so that you can see my hands a little bit more, so I'm going to try to do that. I don't know exactly what it does to the flute sound, but we'll give it a shot. And then I'm going to play it again with some graphics so that you can see more clearly exactly what the fingerings are as we go up. If you've never done this before, it's probably going to sound a little weird to you, but that's okay. We like weird music here. All right, here it comes again, and with some graphics to show you exactly what the fingerings are. Here's a keyboard showing which pitches actually sounded, or approximately which pitches. Of course, this is a flute in A. I've used numbers to show intervals between the pitches like we did in our previous video. If you haven't seen that, all we're doing is counting piano keys. How many keys did we move to get to the next pitch? So our natural scale intervals are a 3 followed by a whole bunch of 2s, or for you music geeks out there, a minor third followed by a whole bunch of major seconds. The bottom note A doesn't even get repeated at the top of the scale. Instead, we get notes on either side of it. On our flute, not all of the twos are exactly the same. Remember, our flutes do not default to the Euroclassical 12-tone equal tuning system like our keyboard does. So we are dealing with approximations here, and we've decided to accept those approximations within what we've been calling microtonal tolerances. Now, some musicians will hear this as a minor third, followed by almost a complete whole tone scale. We're not going to do anything more with it today, but put it back there in your memory somewhere. Just kind of park it for now. We will come back to it. I've heard indigenous songs from the Americas played on flutes that use some form of this mode, and I've even heard flutes that seem to be tuned this way. So we will be coming back to it. Here is our more familiar minor pentatonic scale mapped onto the keyboard. Notice the interval pattern, 3-2-2-3-2, and that the bottom note is repeated at the top to cap the scale. This type of pentatonic scale uses only intervals of 2 and 3. If you play on just the black keys of your piano, all of the scales that you could play would have 5 pitches and would use just interval patterns of 2 and 3. That's why some people refer to these kinds of pentatonic scales as black key pentatonic scales. There are, of course, many other kinds of pentatonic scales on the planet. A lot of you are probably familiar with some form of Hiryuoshi Scale, which is used in a lot of traditional Japanese music. If we were to map that onto our keyboard, we would see 1s and 4s, and we wouldn't see any 3s. And of course, we can play it on our flute, but we'll talk about that another time. Okay, so we've looked at the natural scale of our flute, and we've looked at the most commonly used scale on our flute. Now, if we start asking ourselves some questions, sometimes it will lead us to interesting places. When I play minor pentatonic on my flute, as I said, in effect, I turn my flute into a 5-hole flute with this hole covered. Well, what happens if we keep a different hole covered? Now, I've noticed, just through goofing around, that on most of my flutes, whether they're indigenous made or not, whether they're contemporary tuned or not, I have noticed that this fingering and this fingering usually produce almost the same note, like within 20 cents or less of each other. And remember that it's 100 cents between adjacent piano keys. So we're talking very small differences here. And if I use my breath, I can dial them in really, really close. See what you think. Those are really pretty close. So what happens if I keep this finger hole covered the whole time and just walk up and down my flute instead of this one? So in other words, what if I pretend that I have a 5-hole flute that's been made a little bit differently? It sounds like this. Well, I like the sound of that. So I'm going to start at the bottom and go to the top again, and this time I'll put up graphics so that you can see very clearly what the fingerings are, and you will notice that this hole stays covered the whole time. Index finger on the bottom hand stays down the whole time. If I map those pitches onto my keyboard and compare it to our regular minor pentatonic scale, you'll see that really the notes are almost the same. We've replaced E with an F, and that pitch is produced using this fingering. Right? Now, if you've not used this fingering before, do yourself a favor and learn it. It is incredibly useful for lots of really cool musical things on our flute. Notice also that this alternate pentatonic is also a black key pentatonic. The interval pattern is nothing but 3s and 2s. It's just been switched up a tiny little bit from minor pentatonic mode. Our minor pentatonic mode, the pattern was 3-2-2-3-2. And here in the alternate pentatonic, it's 3-2-3-2-2. Notice also that we now have an alternate fingering for this. This is the next to top fingering in our usual minor pentatonic scale, our basic scale. And on many flutes, this is a useful alternate fingering. Now on this particular flute, these fingerings produce pitches that are about 20-30 cents apart. So if I play them next to each other, you can really hear the difference. But if I'm playing those in the context of music making, we don't notice the difference nearly so much. On some of my flutes, though, those fingerings produce pitches that are even farther apart. And on some of them, they're so far apart, you begin to wonder if they're actually usable as alternate fingerings. So you'll have to let your ear decide on each of your flutes, compare those fingerings, and see if they feel like good alternates to you. If you like the sound of this mode, just mess around with it for a while. Go up and down, have some fun, get it into your fingers, get it into your ears, and see if any melodies start to fall out of your flute. Remember that minor pentatonic scale, our usual basic scale, it's the ring finger on the upper hand that is down all the time. But in this mode, our index finger on the bottom hand is down all the time. So it's like we now have a different 5-hole flute. The music you're hearing underneath is a bit of my track, Oak Revisited, from my Many Roads Home project. It was played on this very flute, a flute in G, and the main melody is entirely in the alternate pentatonic mode that we've been looking at today. There's a link for the entire track in my description box, or you can find it at my music videos playlist. Try playing along if you want to. This is really one of my very, very favorite projects, and the entire album's available here on YouTube Music and in most streaming sites. If you decide to look for it at your favorite streaming site, look for the album title, Many Roads Home, or for the band name, Our Soiree. It's my project, but a lot of the streaming services listed under the band name, so that's the most secure way to find it. Also, the outro music that you're about to hear, you'll hear 3 flutes wailing away, but the top flute is a high C flute. It's carrying the main melody, and it is also entirely in alternate pentatonic mode. There's a link for that track in the description box as well. Let me know in the comments what you think of this mode, and if you already use this mode, let us hear how you use it. Tell us how we can listen to how you like to play this mode. Next time we're going to try out several cool things with it that you can do at your next flute circle gathering, and it'll be a lot of fun. As always, please hit those like and subscribe buttons, share this with a friend or with your flute circle buddies, and if you do want to do a deeper dive or move faster than we're moving here in the videos, drop me a direct message or visit the website. We can work out a coaching session or some private lessons or a workshop with your flute circle buddies, whatever fits for you. So have fun, and I will see you next time.